He never meant to film a killer. That's the part that chills people the most. On a cold February afternoon in 2017, 14-year-old Libby German held up her phone on an old railroad bridge in Delphi, Indiana, joking with her best friend, 13-year-old Abigail, Abby Williams. They laughed, filmed each other, and tried not to look down at the drop beneath the rotting wooden ties. By the end of that day, both girls would be found murdered in the woods below. And hidden inside Libby's phone was a grainy video of the man believed to have done it. He's become known by 3 words: down the hill. A blurry figure in a blue jacket, hands in his pockets, walking toward 2 kids who didn't realize they were recording their own killer. Delphi, Indiana, wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to become the focus of an international true crime obsession. It was small, quiet, the kind of town people describe as safe without thinking. On February 13, 2017, school was out for a scheduled day off. For Abby and Libby, that meant one thing: freedom. Sleep in, hang out, go outside. They weren't the type to sit inside all day. Like a lot of kids their age, they straddled 2 worlds, small-town routine and online life. They liked Snapchat, inside jokes, and taking photos wherever they went. That afternoon, they asked Libby's older sister, Kelsey, for a ride to a local spot everyone in Delphi knew, the Monon High Bridge Trail. Once part of an old railway line, the bridge towered nearly 70 feet above Deer Creek. It was beautiful, slightly dangerous, and popular with teens who wanted good photos and a little thrill. Kelsey dropped them off around 1:35 p.m. near the trailhead. It was bright daylight, picture it. Other people were out walking. Nothing about that moment felt like the beginning of a nightmare. At 2:07 p.m., Libby posted to Snapchat, Abby walking along the bridge, arms tucked into her jacket, balancing on the narrow wooden planks. It's the kind of image hundreds of kids post every day, friends goofing around near something a bit risky, capturing the moment. No one knew it would become one of the most analyzed photos in modern true crime history. Shortly after that post, something changed. The timeline goes quiet. No more snaps, no answered calls, no texts. Just silence. When 3:15 p.m. came and went with no word from the girls, their family initially didn't panic. Teenagers lose track of time. Cell service can be bad. Maybe they'd walked farther down the trail. But by late afternoon, concern hardened into fear. Calls went straight to voicemail. Texts went unread. When Kelsey and other family members went back to the trail and couldn't find them, they did what small-town families do: they called friends, they walked the paths, they shouted their names into the trees. As the sun began to sink behind the bare winter branches, someone finally made the call that no one ever wants to make: 911. Within hours, search teams flooded the area. Local volunteers, fire crews, police, K-9 units, everyone who could help, did. Flashlights swept over tree trunks and thorn bushes. People slogged through mud and tripped over roots, guided by the beam of headlights from parked trucks. The search went late into the night, but the terrain was rough, and darkness won. Officials made the agonizing decision to pause and resume at first light. No one wanted to say the words out loud, but everyone felt the weight of them: something was very wrong. On February 14, Valentine's Day, the search resumed at full strength. Not far from the end of the Monon High Bridge, off a rugged path near Deer Creek, a volunteer spotted something in the brush. Minutes later, the radio chatter changed. The tone dropped. Law enforcement moved in, closing off the area. There, in the woods not far from the bridge they'd walked the day before, the bodies of Abby Williams and Libby German were found. What had started as a missing persons search was now a double homicide investigation. News spread through Delphi like a shockwave. Parents kept their kids home. Businesses closed early. A handmade memorial of flowers, stuffed animals, and candles began to grow near the trailhead. In a town that hadn't seen a crime like this in living memory, people weren't used to this kind of fear. They knew the girls. They knew the families. They knew the bridge. Now they had to face something unthinkable. Someone had used that familiar place as a hunting ground. Behind the scenes, investigators began the painful, methodical process of trying to understand what had happened between that 2:07 p.m. Snapchat post and the discovery of the bodies. They examined tire tracks, footprints, disturbed foliage. They interviewed anyone who'd been on the trail that day. They pulled security footage from nearby homes and businesses. And they did something else, something almost no one outside the case knew about at first. They took possession of Libby's phone. What they found on it changed everything. Hidden between everyday photos and messages was a short, shaky video. It appeared to have been recorded on the Monon High Bridge itself, with the camera held low and discreet. In the background, you can see the wooden planks of the bridge, the trees beyond, and a man walking toward the girls. He's wearing a blue jacket, a brownish hat, jeans. His hands are in his pockets. His head is down. You can't see his face clearly, the frame is too small, the motion too rough, but everything in his posture feels wrong. He doesn't walk like someone out for a peaceful hike. He walks like someone who has already made up his mind. That wasn't all. At some point, Libby had tapped record again, this time, capturing audio. When police later released a tiny portion of that clip, the world heard a man's voice, low and controlled, giving a quiet command. Down the hill. Just 3 words. But they carried the weight of everything that followed. Law enforcement made a decision that would turn this case into a global obsession. They released a short portion of the video and audio to the public. For the first time, people watching the evening news or scrolling their phones weren't just hearing about an unknown killer, they were looking straight at his blurred, stumbling shape, listening to his voice. True crime viewers like to think they understand fear, that they've seen enough cases to be numb. But there is something uniquely horrifying about hearing a man calmly directing 2 children to go down the hill, knowing what happened next. It felt less like a clue and more like a ghost, stuck on a loop. From that moment on, the Delphi killer had a nickname, Bridge Guy. A blurry jacket, a hat pulled down, a few seconds of awkward gait. That was all anyone had to cling to. And yet, people did. They froze frames, sharpened images, boosted contrast, traced outlines. Some insisted they could see a weapon. Others thought they saw a fanny pack, a badge, a logo on his jacket. For every new screenshot posted online, 100 new theories were born. Meanwhile, Abby and Libby became more than just names in a headline. They were remembered as they truly were, funny, creative, inseparable. Abby loved art and animals. Libby loved photography and sports. They were silly, loud, and loud together. Photos of them making faces at the camera, leaning on each other's shoulders, and posing with family circulated alongside the grainy clip of the man on the bridge. It created a heartbreaking contrast, 2 bright young girls full of life, and a dark, shapeless figure representing the person who took it away. As the days turned into weeks, Delphi transformed. Patrol cars sat near the trail. The bridge became both a memorial and a crime scene, wrapped in tape, heavy with flowers and handwritten notes. The town installed more cameras. Parents watched the news every night, listening for any sign that someone, anyone, had been arrested. But no one was. Even with Libby's courageous recording, even with the killer's voice, the case remained wide open. And somewhere out there, the man in the blue jacket had to know that his face, blurred or not, was everywhere. Watching him. Waiting for someone to recognize him. In the days after the murders, investigators believed they were close. They had a suspect on video. They had his voice. They had a timestamp, a location, and evidence from the crime scene that was kept tightly under wraps. In most cases, that kind of evidence leads to an arrest within days. But this wasn't most cases, and Delphi wasn't most towns. The FBI set up a mobile command center. Dozens of agents combed through fields and creek beds. Locals lined up voluntarily to give DNA samples. Nearby landowners handed over security footage and opened their barns without hesitation. Tips poured in, thousands of them, so many that additional phone lines had to be installed. But every lead eventually ran into the same wall. The man in the video was too generic. His clothes were common. His figure, average. His gait, unremarkable. His voice, calm and controlled. He could have been anyone. Forensic analysts reviewed the short audio clip repeatedly. Some thought they heard anger. Others heard confidence. Some thought he sounded older, a few believed he was surprisingly young. But the phrasing, "down the hill," suggested authority. Command. Purpose. Investigators held back most of the audio. They released only those 3 words, leaving the rest locked away. People online speculated endlessly. Did he say something else? Did he threaten them? Did the girls speak? The silence around that unreleased audio became its own haunting mystery. As spring approached, families in Delphi began locking their doors again. Children stopped walking home alone. Parents looked twice at everyone on the street. Anyone with a blue jacket or hands in their pockets drew quiet suspicion. The bridge, once a scenic overlook, became a place no one wanted to go. Weeks into the investigation, police released a composite sketch of the suspect based on eyewitness accounts. He looked middle-aged, heavy-set, with a goatee. But then, 2 years later, they did something almost unheard of, they replaced it. The new sketch showed a much younger man, clean-shaven, thinner, sharper features. It contradicted almost everything the public had grown used to. Investigators insisted both sketches were viable but emphasized the newer one. The result was confusion. Armchair investigators, and some professionals, debated endlessly. Was Bridge Guy old? Young? Heavy? Thin? Was he disguising himself? Or were there 2 men involved? Police said no. The killer was one person. But which sketch was the real face behind the blurry footage? Behind the scenes, investigators believed the killer was local, someone who knew the trail well enough to disappear quickly. Delphi sits at a crossroads of old rail lines, forested paths, hunting grounds, and creek beds. If someone wanted to flee unseen, there were dozens of routes. Then came a potential break. A man living in a nearby town was arrested for an unrelated crime. His demeanor, his background, his location, everything suggested he should be looked at closely. People online named him as a likely suspect. But authorities dismissed him publicly. Then another arrest. And another tip. And another suspect. Each one fell apart. The one person they needed, the man in the video, remained just out of reach. Meanwhile, Abby and Libby's families were living in 2 timelines at once, the one where they woke up every day without their daughters, and the one where they clung to the hope that the killer would eventually make a mistake. Libby's grandfather became a public voice for the family. Calm, determined, unwavering. He reminded the world that his granddaughter's bravery, pulling out her phone, recording her killer, was the reason investigators had any clues at all. She had done what many adults wouldn't think to do under pressure. She became a hero in her final moments. Rumors spread that investigators had far more than they were telling the public. Some claimed there were multiple videos. Others whispered that the audio clip included screams or the girls pleading for their lives. None of this was ever confirmed. But law enforcement hinted at one thing repeatedly: the crime scene contained signatures, details only the killer would know. Signatures are not random. They mean something. They reflect ritual, motive, psychology. As soon as that word was used, everything changed. This wasn't a simple crime of opportunity. Someone had taken time to do things that made sense only to them. That's when the case crossed from horrific into chilling. Years passed. Leads dried up. Online theories became wilder and more elaborate. Many believed the case would never be solved, and then, in October of 2022, authorities announced an arrest. A man from Delphi. A pharmacy worker. Someone who lived just minutes from the Monon High Bridge. Richard Allen. He had been hiding in plain sight, going to work, walking through town, living an ordinary life. But he wasn't a stranger to investigators. They had spoken to him back in 2017, when he admitted he had been on the trails the same day Abby and Libby were killed. At the time, he said it casually, as if it was nothing. And maybe that's why he slipped through the cracks. When police searched his property years later, they found something prosecutors described only as significant. They also claimed he had made incriminating statements. But the case immediately became tangled in legal fighting, sealed documents, leaks, accusations of mismanagement, and delays. Even now, years later, the case has not reached trial. And Delphi waits. Today, the Monon High Bridge still stands, weathered, decaying, but no longer a place anyone visits without a cold feeling in their stomach. A memorial rests nearby with photographs, ribbons, stones, and notes written by strangers from all over the world. The trail itself has become a symbol, not of beauty, but of the thin line between innocence and danger. Parents in Delphi grow up telling their kids two names as both a warning and a promise. Abby and Libby. Two girls who were brave. Two girls who deserved more time. Cases like this haunt us not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. A blurry walk. A quiet command. A moment recorded on a teenager's phone that should have been the key to everything, yet still left the world with questions. And until the court reaches a verdict, until the final truth is spoken aloud, Delphi remains suspended between two realities, one where justice is coming, and one where a shadow on a bridge still walks free.